Hello and welcome to another AGD video. This is just an update to my previous video where I showed you how to make a sprite sheet, and in this video, as an addition, I'm going to show you how to make a standalone setup which you can load sprites into from binary and then print out, which means that you're going to save a lot of time typing in the code that I showed you last time. All you have to do instead is export the files and then import them into this code. So we're starting here with the standard AGD empty file. I'm just clearing out the unnecessary information. Going to set the color to 7 here and clear the screen. This was in the game initialization code. The next part is to go to the restart screen and just wipe all of that data away because it's completely unnecessary. Let's take a little look. We'll run the code, and as we can see, absolutely nothing happening there. And so the next thing that we're going to do is look at the sprite, and you can see by default there is a type 0 sprite. It has no image, and that's exactly what we want. We don't need to change the screen size or anything like that. Okay, so now let's look at the code itself. First of all, we have to initialize the sprite. We will delete all of the code, of course, that's there because there's no sprite type 2. And because we're only using one sprite, we don't need the if statement that we had in the previous example. All we have to do is say let x equal 0, let y equal 0, image 0, frame 0. And we start with f as 1. In the previous video it was 0, and there was a small error. It was displaying the first frame twice. So by changing f to 1, we've fixed that little problem. And then we set g to 0, that's our column counter. And now there's a couple more variables that have been added. The first one is t. This is the total number of sprites plus 1. So in this case I have 31 images, and so I'm setting the limit to 32. And the last, well, there are two more variables. The next one is variable c. So variable c basically is controls the number of columns. So if you want to display 8 or 10 or 16, you can display the grid. You can change the size of the grid, basically the width of the grid. And finally we've got let h equal 24 or 16, because this is the variable which allows you to choose between 24 or 16 height with the sprites. So I thought it would be a good idea to take that into account with the code as well. Okay, so now let's look at the main script which does all the magic. Here we're going to event type 0. This has already been written in, but I'll talk you through it. So if t greater than f, so t we know is the total, and what we're doing here, we used to use o and p variables, but instead I'm just going to use let line x, let column y, divide line by 8, divide column by 8, and put the blocks and reset the columns. So this just eliminates the need for o and p. And then here we've got h equals 24. That's just to check for the sprite height, and it will add another 2 blocks because obviously a sprite of 24 pixels high is going to need 6 blocks rather than 4. So it adds one more row. It adds one to f, it adds one to g. We've been through this already before. And there you can see add h to x rather than 16. That's the sprite height. And that's pretty much it. Obviously g equals c as well, I should mention. That's the columns. So that's really all of the code there to basically display a sprite. And the next thing that I'm going to do is, which I've already done here, is to create a whole load of empty sprite images. So I've done that already. I've actually created 96, which is plenty, really, enough for pretty much any game, I would say, so that it's ready. Again, it's just to save time. What I've got here is a completely empty program, and all I'm going to have to do is load a binary into it, run it, and it'll display the sprites. So I've already shown you in a previous video how to save off sprites as a binary, and all you'll need to do then with this program is load them back in and run the code. So I'm going to save that off as a snapshot. I'm going to call it sprite dump, and I'm not going to need to do any more typing anymore after this. I'll just use this program to display my my sprites by importing a binary file, which I've already shown you how to do, as I said in a previous video. So let's just look at how we import the sprites themselves as a quick reminder. The export part, as I said, watch that in one of the previous videos. We're looking at the memory here around 7D, 3D, and you can see the two numbers there, 9052. That tells me where the sprite data is stored. There is also another little bit of information you might find useful here. That's at memory point 7D13. That actually tells you how many frames in total, and 60 in hexadecimal is 96 frames, which I'd already mentioned and you saw. So we have to flip the numbers. 5290 becomes 9052, and again, as I keep saying, it's in the previous video. Go and watch that if you haven't seen it. And we get the start of the sprite data, and go back to Fuse, and we are now going to import that data into our program and run the code, and it should display all the sprites. So we'll go to File, Load Binary. This is a file I've already created previously, and again, previous video, watch it when you get a chance. And so I just put the variable into here and the value of the memory, and as you'll see, it's actually loaded in 32 frames of data. Now it would be possible, because I've got 96 here, it would be possible for me to load in another address. I just have to calculate the position, add the number of frames, and load in more sprites from another game and merge them all together if I wanted to. That's another advantage of this system. As you can see in here, we've got the limit is set to 32, so I would change that if I had more or less sprites to show. Let's just run that, and there it is. It's showing you all the data that it has imported, and of course you can just save that off as a file. Let's take a look at what happens when we change the columns. And again, this is an initialized sprite. I'll change the number of columns here to, let's say, 16, and run it again, and you'll see that we now have it displaying in 16 columns. So it depends on how you want to run your sprites. Really, it makes it easier if it's in a square rather than a long rectangle like that, I think, in terms of using the scratch pad, but it's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's really pretty much it. I think that's the best way to do it now. I'm going to save this file off and make it available to you guys on the Facebook page. So all that remains for me to say is keep enjoying AGD. Please like and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.